I'm not Krishnendra Joshi. He's a handsome lad, and he does a fab job, very passionate. Uh, we have a very interesting panel. We have somebody who works with a consulting company, but a tax practice. So clearly, what's happening with the regulatory regime in terms of taxes, very important to businesses. We have a law firm professional who again is very active in the community and will bring his perspective in Varun. And we have Sahil, who's been a GC and now an independent legal professional. He's worked at a law firm, he's worked at 2 media companies, so he also understands, for example, right now it is about, yesterday I was on the group of some publishers, I'm on the board of 2-3 publishing organizations, and we were talking about why should the AI firms be allowed to crawl all our content without our permission? Because that's our IP, there's economic value created there, and why should they get the economic value without our permission? And why is the government really allowing them to do that? A blanket with no permission. So anyway, let me start by saying that there is a new creative economy. India is growing, and let me get your, are the laws keeping pace? Are the legal professionals keeping pace? What should be the outlook for this new economy? Because it's a creative economy, it's a digital economy, and the policy is changing very fast. Let me first get Priyanka's opening comments, and then I'll go around the house to Varun and Sahil.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Priyanka Duggal. I work with Grant Thornton, Bharat LLP. I am a deal structuring partner, look at tax and regulatory aspects extremely closely. He mentioned about CA and law combination and all of that. I am one of those who have been a CA as well as a lawyer throughout my journey. And I have to say that law actually brings a better perspective for a person. So as a tax professional, while CA will give me the numbers, etc., but reading the law, applying it for negotiations from a tax perspective becomes very, very important. And I have to, add that point because he mentioned something about the CAs today. And law specifically has helped me grow and evolve as a tax professional in a better manner, which a CA could do. Okay, I think on the...
And on what the topic is, legal priorities for India's new economy. Yeah. Venture capital, data privacy and technology law. Let me get your opening comments on that.
So from a venture capital side, I'll say, few years back, it used to be very specific to, early stage funding, very asset heavy linear businesses. But in today's time and world, what we end up seeing is a lot more digital or digitized businesses, AI, fintech. And with all of that comes a lot of nuances related to cross-border structuring, etc., which needs to be involved. And that's why we see, a few years back, companies used to come up to us for setting up an overseas holding company and how to structure that better, etc., from an Indian ODI, regulatory, tax perspective. But today, all of them wants to flip back to India. So I think that is the perspective which has changed. While a few years back, India was not a niche market for this, and the landscape for VC has completely changed, where all of them wants to now invest into an Indian holding company in the want of a better exit from a IPO or a fundraise perspective. So that's how I'll say the landscape has changed. That's my first immediate take on this.
Your opening comments, Varun.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. So, first of all, just to briefly coming on to the topic, but so I'm the founding managing partner of RSD Bajaj Global, and also recently got elected senior vice president at Society of Indian Law Firms, where part of the Shardul Shroff committee on the foreign law firms. But want to mention
allowing the foreign firms to come or not allowing?
So that's no. for
like we,
see, there's a saying.
Harvinder does a cancer conference. So I said, is the cancer and prevention of cancer conference or a cancer conference? So similarly.
So Shakespeare said, bring all the lawyers together and kill them because we don't give a straight answer.
No, never say that. Words have tremendous power. God give long life to everyone, including lawyers.
Right. So I think why I mentioned that is, while the journey has been very magnificent, but it started with BW, where we got the emerging law firm of the year. So I'm always very thankful.
And I didn't know them. None of us knew them in 2019.
Right. So we were first generational, absolutely. And I think a great platform build with for first generation lawyers, I always tell, to grow on merit. So to answer, and we have grown through the new economy, so I think this is a great topic. So I would say my response to that is that if we take the Indian economy, it's broadly $3.5–4 trillion, out of which 1 trillion is new economy. Now, what you see as an upside at a level, if India has to touch 5 trillion, your traditional economy is primarily agri and manufacturing, right? And it is facing huge resistance because of a lot of geopolitical reasons, because the US policy is really disrupting the manufacturing space, and agri was already under pressure. So what the policy makers do, and when we are also part of that, is that they want to focus on the new economy to touch the $5 trillion mark, to increase this 1 trillion to another trillion, to touch that. And for that to happen, your frontier tech is a great opportunity. Your AI, robotics.
Deep tech.
Deep tech. You know, an open AI company can touch $1 trillion valuation today.
And we are so futuristic in exchange from India. Our head of tech is called Deep. So we are deep tech.
Yes.
No, kidding.
So therefore, I feel the new economy is actually the opportunity where actually the government is also focusing today. And what are the constituents of new economy? There are two major players. One are the investors, the block, which we call the venture capital funds, and we represent a lot of those. Second are the new age companies, the entrepreneurs, right, which are actually creating the value. And I think both these stakeholders, they form the critical path, and I think policy making on both is required. Especially, I would want to touch on the venture capital part. Earlier, this entire funding on the new economy was coming pre-COVID from China and US. Now, what happened in COVID, there was a press 3 note which came in, border state investments were not permitted. That ended the Chinese investment through a direct route, until unless you had a very innovative lawyer to answer in a way. So the opportunity was only left with US money, but with the change of regime at the US level, that's created stress. So when we talk to the policy level, they feel they need to encourage domestic capital to fund this new economy, because the strategic assets of next age are going to come through the new economy. So the policy makers today are really focusing to encourage domestic funds. But I think one issue which I want to flag here, and I think Businessworld has that power, that there was a recent change by SEBI on the angel funds regime, where they have said that you need to be an aggregated investor to put money in an angel fund. Now that is, their financial threshold is very high. So I think we are representing a lot of those angel funds in that industry issue. The government should look into it, because if the agenda is to push domestic money to fund this new economy, they will need to encourage more angel investors to put in money. So I think that is a huge policy push which is there, and I think domestic capital will win, because the owners of these new Teslas, OpenAIs from India should be Indian, and it should be by, as they say, as our preamble says, it should be by the Indian, for the Indian, and of the Indian. So that is my
absolutely,
opinion.
but I mean, it gets Sahil to come in, and he has a background in law firm, a top-tier law firm, and 2 top-tier media companies. But let me respond to that. Can I tell you, when 10 years back, when, let's say, investing in deep tech and the new age startup started, less than 4% of money was Indian. So if 100 rupees was being invested into these new age startups, 4 rupees were Indian, right? It is 10 rupees now with all the talk. With all the talk, it is less than 10 rupees, okay? It's about 10 rupees. 10% basically, I'm saying 100, 10. So still there's a long way to go there. Second, Priyanka talked about firms wanting to flip back to India because of the wealth creation opportunities there, the opportunities for exit. And the third question I would say is that in some of the technologies, India is leapfrogging, you know. When I was in the business school 30 years back, you would talk about leapfrogging. That leapfrogging is happening now. And India is becoming a supplier of that technology, or an IP owner. Still very small, but there is an ambition of the Indian government and policymakers to be able to strengthen that ecosystem from India. So we'll come back to that. Sahil, your opening comments. You know, you were advising as a legal professional, as a GC, advising large business operations. You're helping people evaluate acquisitions. What are the key legal and governance challenges that you see new age companies and unicorns facing as they scale up?
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm Sahil, Vohra. I have been a law firm, Counsel. I've been, as Annurag already mentioned, I've been GC for a couple of media companies, and my strong point today is venture capital. Just adding on to, if I may, what Priyanka and Varun were talking about venture capital, which is something that's quite dear to me. I enjoy venture capital work, is the fact that in addition, of course, to capital flight on account of Press Note 3, etc., like Varun mentioned, there's also been a paradigm shift in terms of just the mentality with which capital is looked at today from an investor standpoint. So investors today are not dying to jump onto the bandwagon as they were about 15 years ago when I first got into the e-commerce space, which was then the blue-eyed sector of the Indian economy. Capital, in short, has become smart. So investors have become smart. They look at unit economics, they look at regulatory risk, they look at teams closely, they look at the sector viability. There's a bunch of, today we've got a bunch of founders who are second and third time founders, for example. Serial entrepreneurs is the catchword today. Founders have become smart. They have become more nuanced. They've become more sophisticated. They ask you intelligent questions like liquidation preference, anti-dilution. What does this mean for me at, say, not at a Series Seed or a Series A? What does this mean for me at a Series C? What does this mean for me at an exit-related stage? Will I get dragged? What are my liquidity options myself? So things have become more nuanced, more sophisticated. And I think governance has also started playing a very big role in terms of how startup founders see things. When I came into the in-house industry in 2010, 2011, legal was looked as a roadblock. Today, legal is a value add, which is a very big difference.
It's an enabler. It's a strategic multiplier, like you are fortifying your technology, fortifying your agreements, and legal can bring strategic insights. I've done 2 acquisitions. I've sold 2 companies, so I know the value a law firm or a legal professional can add. Now, Priyanka, let me come to, from a tax policy perspective, which tax provisions urgently need to be revisited and revamped to keep pace with evolving businesses in this new economy that Varun and Sahil are referring to?
There are actually lots of them. So, we are going to look at the new income tax bill next year very soon. But unfortunately, lots of the nuances which exist for fintech companies are still not plugged in there. And I'll give you a very small little example of that. When a company is remitting money overseas, or you're making a payment for, let's say, a small subscription fee which is supposed to be undertaken, there is still a withholding tax which is required to be deducted. And more likely than not, you will not have the particular details, and hence that withholding tax liability ends up being on the payer. We still do not have a mechanism to fix that small of a problem.
Receiver.
Yeah. So eventually what happens is the cost base increases, etc. And hence, the cross-border transaction cost is increasing because of the tax elements. The second thing which we also, notice is the other regulatory regimes around cross-border transactions, specifically related to, creation of permanent establishment for new age tech businesses. Where let's say the cloud is sitting overseas, the engineers are sitting in India, and the data team is also sitting in India, and hence, some of those clarifications are also required. While the regulatory regime has evolved excellently well, I think tax is far behind on all of those, and hence we keep seeing lots of litigation, on permanent establishment issues. There is also an age-old issue of what qualifies as a software as a product versus a software as a service. Again, lots of those emerging issues are there, and unfortunately our tax laws, whether we call it direct tax or indirect, they're all extremely old, built for asset-heavy, linear businesses, not fully plugged in for, digital businesses. And hence, one important thing I feel is, which becomes important for every startup or VC is structuring it well in advance. because we are aware of what could be the potential issues. Ensuring that some of those tax gaps are filled in, your compliance and your governance is top notch, because some of those will eventually hit you at the deal making time, which is not something they would want to, cover up on that front. And hence, so, there are lots of them, but I think top three, I'll say compliance. Second, some of the permanent establishment and place of effective management issues specifically for new age digital businesses. And third, lack of incentives. There are not many incentives today available from a tax perspective for new age businesses. Let's say if they want to invest in R&D, if they have an IP holding company sitting in India. So incentives is again, I'll say the last thing which is on the top of my mind.
Now, Varun, let me come to you. There's a lot of work happening across fund and new economy companies. By the way, I've never prepared a speech except in my brain. I read the script once, I don't. So you can, it actually distracts me. Okay. Yeah, I eat a lot of almonds and I'm a quizzer. So I remember stuff. Okay. So you're being very nice to me, but it distracts me more than it helps me. Right. So let me ask you, one of the things is policy certainty. Of course, policy has to keep pace. It has to evolve as new sectors come. In a lot of sectors, some of the developments for the first time, So you have to respond to that. Are we doing well on that count? And I would want a candid view. I know it is very fashionable to say the right things on a forum because you want to appreciate the positive side of policymakers. But by being constructive about what can be better, you can actually help form better policy. For example, gaming law. Of course, the concerns of the government were right, but overnight it really, if I may say, it killed the industry. Right? So, is there policy consistency? What can be done? And again, in the next few years, there'll be new sectors. I mean, quick commerce in the last 2-3 years is suddenly big, and the government is a very big enabler. It is also a market maker. For example, in drones, the government said we will not only allow Indian-made drones or manufactured drones to have a competitive advantage through policy, we'll also be a market maker. We'll buy $1 billion of drones. So the government is doing a lot of good things. Yesterday the space policy was announced. So the government is very, very progressive. But at the same time, policy consistency matters. Tell us, what are your views on that?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think if India has to be the next Vishwaguru, which is the vision of the government, policy is going to be critical in this phase because in the new economy specifically, because your strategic assets of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 are going to come through the new economy. Now, that's a very good question around policy consistency. But since I am involved at the policy level, I would say more than consistency today, the challenge with the government is actually to understand the data points to build that policy. Like for example, what should be the AI policy of India? Is it whether the copywriter should get the right or the learning program should get it right? Now to arrive at this policy decision itself, you need huge stakeholder discussion. Now, second is like overnight the gaming law changed. Real money games as a market was one of the most booming spaces. It got overturned overnight. Now, why did it get why did this happen so abruptly is also the question. Not only it happened, right? Also, on frontier tech, how would you react to robotics versus your new labor code, which has just come in? Yesterday, I was visiting the Tesla showroom in Gurugram, which is open. They are able to, the first...
I thought you were buying me a new car, gifting me in 2020.
I think we need to discuss that also. But actually, it's not only the cars they are selling. They are selling robotics there. It's on display. So today, in housekeeping, which is costing 20,000, that robot is costing around 5 to 7 lakhs with an EMI of 5,000. So what is your policy on robotics? So is it in sync with your new labor code which you have brought in?
Sure.
So these questions, I think before we get into consistency also, what India is lacked in the Industrial Revolution 3.0 is that policy as a subject was not discussed at length. What do we do at the parliament today? We are not, it's supposed to discuss policy. But 70% of the time, it is getting disrupted on some other issue which is not relevant. So how do you build educative policy? I think that is where good politicians have to come in. And they have to be voted by the government, by the citizens, to have that seriousness. Today, nobody objects if 70% of the parliament time is not getting wasted and not in policy making, but on issues which are not linked to it. But as citizens, we are not agitated by it. The whole idea of policy decision to make it live was to show everybody what they're doing there.
Sure. And that, understand, Varun, you raised a very pertinent question. Sahil, in fact, I feel that when it comes to policy, while the government is very progressive, proactive, and it engages with all the stakeholders, I think younger people should be guiding the government on policy. I feel there is experience and wisdom that older people have, but I think the nuanced understanding of new technology, new business models, rests with the creators who can give a different perspective. So I don't see too many young people on policy.
So you hit the nail on the head, Anurag. What I was actually going to add on to Varun, of course, who elaborated very well and articulately, is the fact that it needs to be a consultative process. That's something we're lacking. You mentioned online gaming. I was actually advising one of the gaming unicorns when this happened overnight. And of course, we all know it's been a bloodbath post that. There was absolutely no consultation at all. And I'm not talking at a mid-management, lower management level. I'm talking about founders of unicorns had no idea what happened. I work with a public policy think tank. I actually called one of them up in virtual panic, and he was in Sweden. He had no idea what was happening. So this is as far as the consultative part of it is concerned. There needs to be a more consultative approach to things. And of course, hand in hand, and as a complementary measure to that is the fact that you have to have, like you said, younger people who have a pulse on what is the current tech that's evolving. They're actually responsible for a lot of that current tech that's evolving. You don't have techies today who are sitting in their 40s or 50s. You've got kids who as young as 14. I met somebody at 13. He's developed a gaming company which I can't name currently, but is being acquired for a few $100 million, and it uses AI in a manner which I think is a little scary. So these are aspects that the government will need to address in terms of consulting with and also actually bringing on board. Having said that, Startup India has a number of people who are fairly young, people in their 20s, people in their 30s who have a pulse on things as well, but they're not necessarily people who are the creators themselves.
Sure. And I must say, there are bodies I don't want to name, they do a good job, but, I remember there's a certain association which is saying we're doing this much in gaming, this much in gaming. What do they have to show for? Nothing, zero, right? So there is that two-way dialogue is not resulting into something. Now let me start with you, Sahil, this time. Give us a couple of, as we go into 2026, and of course, AI is on everyone's mind, so to say. And last night I was watching Christiana Amanpour's show, which I try and watch if I am awake. Mostly I'm not awake at that time. But, she was interviewing somebody from Stanford University, and she was talking about social impact of AI, because the computing power means more and more resources. So we're growing computing power, but we're not growing water. We are growing computing power, but not necessarily we are growing electricity generation. So similarly, there are many aspects of technology's impact that we've not yet factored for the future. What could be those?
I would say in terms of tech impact for the future, the biggest current issue, and I'm not at liberty to discuss this because I'm actually speaking with the government on something directly related to AI. Varun, I think, is actually in cahoots with the government, so he'll be able to actually tell you what the government is thinking if he would like. But tech is actually today looked at completely with a mask of AI, and everyone looks at AI as this harbinger of great things to come in future. But we don't know which way AI is moving. I'm a great adopter of AI. I use AI in multiple ways. But in terms of tech, I would say we aren't emancipated enough today in India compared to what the West is doing to have a broader spectrum of an understanding of where we stand.
And there is a worry that AI is creating even more disparity. I was reading Karen Ho's book yesterday on the flight, and I'm sure you know about the Sama case in Kenya. Now, look at the way the labor was disadvantaged and their labor wages came down, and right now there's a suit going on. So when I read that, it was scary. And then there were other scenarios which I don't want to give. But the fact is, AI will have deep impact, and we'll need to think through the policy. Varun?
Yes, it is. Having said that, just before I pass to Varun, I completely agree. But I think somewhere we've also got to look at AI as a great enabler. We just have to look at it from a holistic point of view of marrying the enabling aspect of AI with the risk aspect of AI. That's it.
Fantastic. Varun, your comments?
Yes. So at the we are part of that. So I'm just going to elaborate some of the key decisions which are there. I think the data privacy policy which is being built is going to be one of the most important decision which India makes in this century. And I think it has, if many would know, the rules on the data privacy has been notified next month. And there is something what we are talking right now, the DP board is getting formed for India, which is the data privacy board, which is going to regulate all the complaints you receive. Now the DP board for the first time has the power to put a penalty up to 250 crores per violation. So therefore, this is going to be a huge disruption in the next 12 months. How the DP board reacts, how the stakeholders move, how companies kind of comply to it. And there's another stakeholders which are coming, which usually come when policy is built, something known as a data activists. So a lot of activists are going to come in to bring down companies. And I can see that happening. Like if you have got a venture capital funding for a couple of $1 million, a competitor would say that file a complaint with the DP board to put a liability of 250 crores because you can get bankrupt day one. Or even if you're not bankrupt, no venture capital will fund you.
How do we safeguard against these things?
So all those issues are going to pan out. So right now what when we are doing this, DP board is being formed and we are at the policy front of that. So they are bringing in technical experts to address these issues. Second is, last week, the AI generative paper has been issued by MITI, which is exactly the AI copyright issue you're talking. Now, AI, if you see, is like a machine, and the oil is the data, right? Now, if it takes on to the entire data and builds over it, how does the value sharing happens is the next important major decision for all the stakeholders. And that also the government is at the right upfront making that policy. Now they are doing consultancy. Any of the stakeholders can go and comment on it also. And they are ready to open to it. My last comment is that for startups specifically, it's going to be very critical because they are going to kind of evaluate this. So these are important. Startups usually don't kind of focus on it, but gaming sector has taught us that unicorns of companies, they need to focus more on policy. They have not today understood they focus on other risks. They do not factor in policy risk in their budgets. They will need to understand that $1 spent on policy is good enough for their business to survive rather than later on.
Your final comments, Priyanka.
I'll just add on to what Varun said, that one is the consultative process which is required for gaming companies like, and we've all seen what happened to them. Second, I want to add on to that, and that's because I'm actually working with some of these gaming companies who are looking to now, who are looking outward. They want to do outbound investments, etc., create their space in a country where, or park their funds in a country and deploy their funds in a country which is okay for gaming laws, where gaming is not going to be a challenge from a real money perspective. But unfortunately, the ODI regulations are also not very clear at this point of time. And hence, some of those nuances needs to be fixed in as well. Along with the ban, ideally they should have thought through flipping off some of these business models, how to come up with the next business model or a next business
Sure.
idea. So that's, I think I'll add on to that, and that's
You
how
know, I want to end by saying that I think with the involvement of professionals like you and those in the room, I'm sure with the dialogue or the conversation they're talking of, and founders being more sensitive to engaging with the policymakers to spend their money, time, effort, energy, and whatever little money, they're able to sensitize the policymakers about possibilities beyond banning, so to say. And one topic which we could do a whole day conference is this crypto. What will happen in the future? Now, if we are talking of a deal with the Americans and with Trump as the president, what is the road forward, right? And last thing, I would want a 30-second comment from you. There are winners of our under 30 awards in the room. What would you say to them as successful professionals? What is that one or two qualities they can have as they really move on with the professions? Priyanka, you?
Be updated with the commercials. I think that's what's happening in the market. You need to be fully up speed with that. Just read as much as possible, and follow what Mr. Batra is also following. So just read as much as possible, be aware of what is happening commercially, and you'll know your calling. You'll know what legal and tax has to do.
Varun?
So my input to all young professionals is generally, whatever you have learned, you are not going to find that valuable. Everything is going to change in this age. So the ability to unlearn and learn is going to determine who are going to be the next leaders.
Sahil?
I think agility is the mantra. A lot of lawyers, including myself, when we started in the profession, you thought if you knew the law, your career was done. And then when I went in-house, I realized, you're a spoke in the wheel, essentially, right? So you've got to be a business enabler. And the job, and I've always said this to my legal teams, is that everyone knows what you can't do and what the law says you can't do. You have to tell them how to do it. You have to marry business with the law.
I will say, having interacted with the legal community over the last 6 years, we launched BW Legal World on 12th December. I would say three things. First is what Sahil said, know beyond law. The more you know, the less you know. Second, I think soft skills matter. And third is mentorship. I think it's very important. Both formal and informal mentors help you grow. Do this. Of course, read BW Legal World and Businessworld. Read our managing editor, Mr. Palak Shah's stories. I'll show you some of the stories he does. That's how I lost some of my hair. And, I'll tell you that in my address. But please give Priyanka, Varun and Sahil a big round of applause. Our next set of speakers are here. And thank you once again.